Berlin Wall was brought down, there was newfound hope that Germany will be united. Of course, the four allies, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, France, and the Soviet Union, had gone through both great wars and did not agree with this sentiment. They had seen the immense power that Nazis and the German Empire had held when they were united as one country. But to understand all this, we need to travel back in time, to 1945 to be exact. In July of 1945, the three main powers of the Allies met for the Potsdam Conference. The United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom met to decide how to split Germany so that they wouldn't have any power. Eventually, it was decided that Germany was to be split into 7 regions. The UK was to control the northwest part of Germany, while the Americans controlled the southern territories close to modern-day Austria. France would control the sliver of land between these two, and the Soviets would control the eastern parts of Germany between the River Elbe and the Nessie River. Kaliningrad was given to the country of Russia, and all remaining territories beyond the Oder and Nessie rivers were given to Poland. Tsar Protectorate would emerge in 1946. In 1943, the three capitalist allies merged their territories into a new country known as the Federal Republic of Germany, commonly known as West Germany. In response to this, the Soviets created their own country called the German Democratic Republic. The suffering. After the splitting was done, the East Germans were now suffering from malnourishment. Why? The factories that produced essential goods were now inside the borders of West Germany and could not be accessed. Food stores eventually began to run out of these goods, and because of that, workers did not have an incentive to work in the factories, which meant the economy stopped in its tracks. Meanwhile, in the Western country, the German economy was flourishing from American aid in something called the Marshall Plan. When the Easterners learned of this, tens of thousands of people fled their homes to go to the more prosperous West. The Soviets did not like this and started propaganda showing that leaving the country was an immoral and apolitical choice. The exodus still continued, however, so General Walter Ulbricht sought to bring the country out of its ruins. He thought a good old 5-year plan of industrializing the economy would make it better. He fully embraced Stalin's teachings by starving his people even more. The SED, or the East German Communist Party, tried to make up for this by increasing the worker quotas to 110% of what they normally worked. This last change is what made people tip over the edge. Hundreds of thousands of people fled to the West in the summer of 1953. In that same year, a workers' strike turned into a protest which demanded free elections and other reforms. This movement spread across the country and took place in every city and town. The uprising was quelled when Soviet tanks were brought in. By the 1960s, around 4 million people had fled from the country to the West. The SED had tried to stop them by fortifying their border walls, but people escaped through Berlin because it was a half capitalist and half communist city, making the entire city a giant loophole. In 1961, the German government had enough and built the Berlin Wall, separating the East from the West, with a 156-kilometer wall separating This wall was an effective solution because only 500,000 more people were able to abscond the wall after in the next 30 years. Revitalizing the economy and the life of East Germans. As the 1960s rolled around, the East German population realized that because of others leaving East Germany, there was no longer a shortage of houses or shortage of jobs. Economy started to improve from that point onwards. People are now not only able to buy essentials, but also luxury items like cars. By the start of the 1970s, the German Democratic Republic had the richest economy in the Eastern Bloc, 17th place in the world. The German Democratic, but always, some changes come with flaws. Since the government was in control of all goods that were produced, there were large fluctuations in what wasn't there in the stores. This led to massive store lines and people hoarding their everyday needs. Sounds familiar. Despite all this, standards of living did improve within East Germany. New cultures popped up surrounding the populace of the Easterners. It was mostly looking at the Western Germans and seeing how they were so much beneath the Easterners that the Aussies, or East Germans, were so much superior. Movies and plays showed brave underdogs and the socialist working class as the heroes fighting against fascism and imperialism. In the problem of women's rights, SED did a lot better than most of the world at the time. They didn't care about the traditional gender roles, and it was actually encouraged for women to go to work instead of staying at home doing nothing. This anti-Western culture was most popular with the older generation, while the younger generation rebelled, as they always do, being fascinated by Western culture. In late 1970s and early 1980s, both the GDR and the FRG tried more to cooperate, leading to Western culture seeping into East Germany. Younger generations soon had widespread protests for freedom. But unlike the 1953 uprising, Soviet military forces did not have that much power anymore. In November of 1989, the Berlin Wall was finally brought down. Reunification. The Germans now had a new problem, reunification. Every German wanted it, but no one knew how to do it, other than one man, Chancellor of West Germany, Helmut Kohl. He made his speech in total secret and gave it to the rest of the world leaders 1 hour before he spoke, but in German, so no one could read it. And so on November 28, 1989, a mere 19 days after the wall fell, he made his speech.
Der Weg zur deutschen Einheit, das wissen wir alle, ist nicht vom grünen Tisch zu planen oder ist auch nicht zu planen mit einem Terminkalender in der Hand. Und abstrakte Modelle kann man vielleicht polemisch verwenden, aber sie helfen nicht weiter. Aber wir können, wenn wir nur wollen, uns schon heute auf jene Etappen vorbereiten, die zu diesem Ziel hinführen.
The speech gave hope to West Germany but caused major anxieties to world leaders. The UK, France, the US, and the Soviet Union all had troops on German soil, so they had reserved rights to Germany. Basically, Germany had to ask them for reunification. Germany had to win over the four Allied superpowers. First, Kohl met with President Francois Mitterrand of France to discuss terms of unification. Germany was founded on the defeat of France, and the countries had been rivals in control of Europe for centuries. A unified Germany would be industrially, politically, and economically superior to France. Mitterrand crafted his own plan. If both France and Germany were together, they would have a major hand to play in world affairs. Mitterrand demanded a bigger role for the European Union. One army, one policy, and one currency. This is what the British did not want. Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Britain, lived through the air raids herself and feared that Germany would dominate all of Europe. The problem was that Britain didn't have the same amount of power now as in 1939. Thatcher herself had previously persuaded the British government to release the colonies under British control, and so Britain became the least powerful country between the four powers. Kohl didn't see a way for himself to convince the UK, so he went to ask the next power. So Kohl went to the next power, the US. The USA, led by President George H.W. Bush, did not feel a powerful Germany. They were so far away that Germany wouldn't be able to do any real damage to them for a long time. This would also take a piece of land away from the Soviets and get NATO troops closer to the Russian heartland. US was convinced already. Now came the hard one, the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev and the USSR would not willingly give their territory to their rivals NATO, because East Germany was seen to be part of the Soviet Empire. Not only feared a powerful Germany, they also feared British, French, and American troops being closer to Moscow. It's at this point we need to look at the rest of the Eastern Bloc. While East Germany was protesting, the other countries were in similar stages of revolution. In 2 years' time, the Soviet Union would collapse. Gorbachev knew that he needed large amounts of money to support the ongoing revolutions of the Eastern Bloc, and decided to sell East Germany for $50 billion to revitalize their social structure. There were two conditions given to Germany, though. No NATO bases were allowed in East Germany, and the Russian withdrawal was not allowed to be seen as a retreat. Despite both of them being freed and unified again, They're more fond of the past and resented each other for these changes. Germany has been through many breaking apart, unification, more breaking apart, unification, but without Helmut Kohl, the reunification would have never happened, and the Germans would never have found their families once more again.